you taste, that's how aesthetic is affecting your sushi experience. But before we kind of get into this lecture discussion today, does anyone have any definition for aesthetic? Lexi?
Like visually pleasing, I guess.
Okay, absolutely, visually pleasing. Ari, anything to add?
I was going to say like physical features.
Sorry?
Physical features.
Yes. So just very physically appealing to your eyes, something that you can see and that you notice. This is the very basic definition. Concerned with beauty or the appreciation of beauty. I'm going to take this a step further and say it's concerned with beauty or the appreciation of beauty in a way that affects you. So it's something that whatever is going on a painting or on your plate or in your environment, it's affecting you in a certain capacity. That's important for how we're gonna view sushi. So before we kind of get into this class, how do we think aesthetics and food can be important to each other? Lexi?
You wanna like enjoy what you're eating, so if something looks better, then automatically you're gonna think it'll taste better.
Exactly. So how do you think that works? How does something looking better affect its taste, or at least the perception of that taste?
Are you asking me?
Or anybody? Carrie?
It's kind of like you mentally prepare yourself for this is going to taste good or this is going to taste bad. Maybe you come with a preconception that it's going to like automatically taste that way for you. It's almost like if you smell something, then you'll taste it more that way. So it's like you smell as much as you taste. It builds into the taste, but the looks built in just as much. Like if something is just thrown on a plate and looks bad, then you're probably going to think it'll taste worse than it might actually taste.
Good, good. And you mentioned briefly that there's an aspect of expectation, which means there's something back in your mind, whether it's a memory or a notion or an idea, that's making you connect to how it's going to taste in the future from something you've already learned. So in some ways, the display is an opportunity for us to mitigate the current situation in a really kind of cool, interesting way. Does anyone have anything else on the relationship? Yes?
Yeah, a lot of it can be instinctual, like bright colors and things. And we talked about the Taco Bell salad and like how when they show it on the commercials and everything, it looks really good. And you're like, oh wow, it looks like a really good salad. And then like when you go and you get it, the lettuce is kind of brown and stuff. So if they put what it actually is on the commercial, it wouldn't be as good. But when it kind of comes together and looks kind of uniform almost, but it just is more appealing.
Exactly, exactly. So just like the Taco Bell commercial, when you see this like bright, there's like great lettuce and great meat, and it looks really bright and fresh and appetizing to us. And then that's dealing with a certain notion, a certain expectation that if it looks fresh, it has to taste fresh, which means it's going to taste better. Which are all these kind of connecting ideas of perception and of food and aesthetics and being able to aid in our consumption experience. Good. Is there anything else that you guys know about the aspect of aesthetics? I'm going to mess up this word all class, and I apologize. But aesthetics and consumption of food. Or perhaps the transition that has to go in order to get post-traditional. Just general brainstorm.
Like globalization.
Globalization, absolutely. What aspects of globalization would lead to post-traditional?
So you have like transplant of chefs, but also ingredients or spices.
Exactly, exactly. This kind of infusion of new tastes and this kind of ability to kind of interact with new products that are outside your relative background, your aesthetic background. Great. Meher?
I was going to say that, so for example, in Indian food, I talk about this a lot.
No. Experience.
It started when, like, I guess in the old days, you would eat Indian food by sitting on the floor, because that's seen as like a sign of respect to the earth, and with your hands, and not like utensils. But now, like, that's rarely done. Everyone eats like on a dining table and with spoons and forks and stuff like that. So I feel like that's gone from traditional to post-traditional, like she said about globalization. That's been a huge factor in why that's changed. But that was just like an example I have.
No, that's a great example. So now there's a value to sitting at a table and to be using chairs. What do you think has instigated that change? That kind of shift?
I think a huge part of it has been like Western influence. Like after the British came to India, that was a huge changing point.
interaction, and not only interaction with other cultures, but interaction with cultures that are introducing new technology, new frameworks of how to think about the world and how to think about society and value systems, whether or not they're not better by any means, but they're different, and this produces a shift. So aesthetic theory identifies three main things as the main transition to post-traditional aesthetics: individualism, urbanization, and economy. How do you guys think that individualism, there we go, affects aesthetics in the post-traditional world? And I'll get to lifestyle creation a bit. Yes, Jasmine.
I don't know, the way that I think about it is like when you're watching shows like Iron Chef or Chopped or like Cupcake Wars, and there's always like that emphasis on like a chef that's very like innovative and like does something new and like pioneers some like new technique or something. And so I think like from that is born like different like, methods of cooking and different like types of decoration. Like you see them like doing like the crazy like sugar work and things like that. Like there's kind of no point to it, but just because it's like a new thing and it's like pleasing for some strange artistic reason.
No, that's a really good point. And in some aspects, it's a subset of individualism. It's the idea that people can focus and excel in one area and be okay with that. 200 years ago, you couldn't just spin sugar and make cakes because you couldn't sustain. You have to be able to make your dinner, and be able to make your dessert, and be able to do this wide variety of things if you want to say you work in food. But even that was just a subcomponent of their overall idea. So the fact that people can start individually fulfilling certain capacities is a new concept. Never mind that people are living alone, that people aren't dependent, especially females, aren't dependent on men, and that families aren't a necessary component of society. So it's really the breakdown of society and communities into individuals, and how individuals can kind of have more of an impact, at least moving on this transition. We are by no means in an individualistic society, but we're getting there. We are in progress, and that's one of the things it points out to is as people become more self-interested, so do our arts, so do our food, so do our different aspects of society kind of focus and target on more specific things. Anything else on individualism, on affecting aesthetics? You guys can also draw to painting, to art, to basically anything that would involve visual beauty. Yes, Carrie?
I mean, maybe I'm drawing it too far back, but I just kind of thought like back in like medieval days, which is drawing it really far back, when they used to do like big feast tables where you have like everyone eating like a big banquet hall style.
Yes.
And now it's like so individual, like you have like just individual plates, like I guess even the idea of like conveyor belt sushi where it's like you take an individual plate for yourself. And I mean, I guess like it's almost like the idea of like an O'Hill dining hall experience where you take your individual plate, you get your individual components. Like there can be so much waste in a style like that where like, oh, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, where it's good for the individual,
Yes.
but as an overall whole it might not be as good because you have to get like so many portions as they portion it out for you instead of like, well, I just want like 1 or 2 bites and then you get like a serving size. Whereas if you had like a banquet style, you could be like, I'm going to just get literally the 2 bites that I want to see if I want this.
No, I think that really hits on the button. I think a lot of times, I think going back to medieval is absolutely not a problem. We kind of have this view that, oh, if it's over 100 years ago, then that's traditional. But also things have kind of change has rapidly increased in the past 100 years, much more so than it has in past centuries. So that's perfectly fine to draw back. But I think it makes a great point, the fact that people are now, want to satiate their own desires, but not really looking at the bigger picture. They're not looking at it had a huge part in the minimization of new aesthetics and new food cultures, obviously. With new technologies, we can produce cheaper pasta and cheaper canning and all these new things that allow us to eat in different ways and eat at different prices and different styles, which is really important for how we view, say, convenient food versus, aesthetically pleasing food. So again, it's all these new influences that especially kind of happened in the past century that are affecting our perceptions of aesthetics, which is why sushi is so relevant and so important. Okay, so urbanization. How do we think urbanization affects aesthetics? Yes, Cece.
Well, I guess like the transition from like rural to like a really busy city has like a lot more cultural mixing, so like your perceptions of what you think is beautiful might be altered by like discovering new things, I guess.
Exactly, and this is very much relevant in, say, isolated areas right now where they're being, say, India, when they're being touched and influenced by Western culture, then they're changing. Their value systems are being introduced to new things. Everything's kind of in this moment of fluid transition, which is really interesting and important. Yes?
Do you think it becomes more fast-paced when area is organized? So the individualism factor comes in when everything's readily available and you can get it like.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everything speeds up. Change speeds up. How you perceive the norms speed up and change. Right, how about economy? How does economy affect What do you guys think the difference between these two general topics are? Let's take the first one, aesthetic of entertainment. What does that mean? Josh?
I guess kind of like those sugar spirals on these cupcakes, like, it doesn't really make you want to eat it anymore, but it looks pretty. Whereas gastronomic aesthetic would be like, this makes me want to eat this food more because of whatever the quality of it, I guess.
Great, it provides pleasure outside of food, out of the actual act of eating it. Great. Anybody else? That's one very important component of it. Kinja.
For gastronomic aesthetic, I was thinking of the FDA and how they regulate food for
Okay.
consumption.
How so?
And I was thinking, if food is this temperature or if it has this quality, you cannot consume it for your stomach because it'll make you sick. You'll have gastrointestinal problems. I was just thinking of that. And then aesthetic of entertainment, something could look good. Something is presented in a way that might not make you want to eat it more, but just based on the artist and their creation, they say, hey, this is my presentation of the food. And whether it's good for your stomach or not, they want to make it visually appealing.
Great, great. So that's kind of dividing it into what two areas of food aesthetics is hit. This is how it looks. What environment is it placed into? This is the idea of you're walking to a sushi restaurant and you're sitting at a traditional sushi table, and you're eating something that looks like traditional sushi, and like because of all these things and how it looks, it's affecting you in a certain way, without the taste or the product itself coming into consideration of your perception. Gastronomic aesthetics of food are what are the ingredients? What are the tastes? How does it actually taste like? What sense of beauty does that kind of give to you? As you can see, these two are often and almost always intertwined, unless in the case of like a cake that's just too pretty to eat. But these are the kind of division of how people evaluate food and food aesthetics. Kind of like when you are on Food Network and you are judging, you do looks or creativity, and then you do taste, because they're two different things and they're two different ways that we perceive food. Yes.
And I think the way we kind of established the second one, like what it made me think of was the first was the cupcake, but the second was like these like they're called sausage cheese muffins that my mom would make, but they're like super southern, full of butter and like greasy and stuff. And so like to a lot of people who've seen them, they're like that looks super fattening and all this stuff. So, like they don't see it as aesthetically pleasing, but I love them. But I think it like comes to be associated. It's like through the taste, but like it's kind of a preconceived, like you know that it's gonna taste good beforehand.
Just by how it
opposed to, like
looks.
yeah, like a lot of cupcakes, I think they're really pretty, never end up tasting that good.
Good. Exactly, yeah. So like it's these two things and how they interplay based on your own relative background. But for some people, it's different. Some people can only look at it because they've never had a background with it. Great. So now we're actually going to move on to a little exercise. Like I mentioned, aesthetics kind of forms its own criteria. And that I would argue is very much based on background that you're coming from. It's relative to one area and one set of standards, not one set of standards, but a more generally popular set of aesthetics. So I want you guys to partner up with the person, I guess, next to you. Everyone identify? Awesome. So what we're going to be looking at are a piece of art from the Western canon, mostly American, but not always, and then something from Japan. And we're going to spend about 30 seconds on each picture, and I want you guys to come up with certain aesthetic values that are related to each one. So maybe let's go through paper to like Western and then Japan, and we're going to kind of come up and try to create a criterion for Western aesthetics and Japanese aesthetics based off of this artwork. Any questions before we get going? All right, so you guys have approximately 30 seconds to do this. And I don't know the titles, I'm sorry. Oh, it's always going to go American, Japanese, so this is American.
Yeah, you could have
This hopefully going to convey similar ideas. So throw anything out and I'll write it down. Matt.
The Western ones tend to use shadows,
Shadows, good.
and the Japanese ones tend to have everything outlined.
They what?
Everything in the Japanese ones had like an outline.
Outline, good. So like outline and like distinction. Good. Who else? Yes.
Japanese paintings had a limited color palette. It was typically monochromatic with little like pops of color.
Awesome. And then what would you say for the Western paintings?
I feel like color was a huge factor. Different shades, mixing colors.
Great. Awesome. Kendra.
And a lot of the pieces for the Japanese ones, they had characters on the side.
So the use of like script. Okay, awesome. So the scripts usually have the title and the person who's in it. So for the really funky one with the guy, he's actually a really famous monk. So it'd be similar to a similar artist in Japan versus Van Gogh. So that's why it's kind of that mirror image. Yes, Lexi.
In the Western ones, they tried to blend their brush strokes to make it look like it was really just one color, but in the Japanese ones, they made them really defined.
Good. So distinction. Great. Josh.
We kind of felt like the Western ones all had something very clear of what the eye should be drawn to, but in the Japanese ones, a lot of times it was a lot going on. Yeah, there's a central focus in the Western ones.
So for the Japanese ones, there wasn't. So you say there wasn't.
Well, it wasn't that there wasn't like a point or a single focus of the Japanese ones. It's just it wasn't like there was a lot more going on. It felt like that you
Okay.
didn't exactly know at first what you should be looking at.
Okay, so your eye's not drawn to a
Yeah.
particular thing. Okay, so there's not, let's say, a number one subject